We're going to be studying from the book of Deuteronomy. We are in the 15th chapter of Deuteronomy. Even if you weren't here for the first 14 chapters, it's okay. You'll catch on pretty quickly. I remember years ago when they first built the Reagan Library in Simi Valley. Before it was open to the public, I was invited for a private viewing. They had a number of clergy and they took us through it. It's a magnificent job, whether it doesn't matter what political party you are, but that museum is just a wonderful job, one of the best presidential museums and libraries that I have seen. I've only seen one, but it was from the best that I have seen. If you've gone there on Air Force One, you can take a look at that. And obviously a presidential library is going to be all about that particular administration, the things that happen in the world during that administration. But there was an exhibit, I don't know that it's still there because they keep changing the exhibits, but there was a room dedicated to the gifts that world leaders gave the President of the United States during his 8 years in office. Because I guess when any other world leader comes, they bring a gift with them. I never knew that until that day. But that seems to be the tradition. A gift is given. Either the gift is something representing the country of the world leader from where he comes or she comes from, or it's a gift that has something to do with the President of the United States. So Reagan got a lot of saddles. There were a whole bunch of saddles there. He got jelly bean crystal jars. And they were in these magnificent, beautiful showcases, well lit. The room was beautiful and glitzy with silver and gold and crystals and precious gems and stones. And it got me thinking, you realize the value of what's in this room. And that's just one president. Every president receives these gifts. Now, there is a law that a president, when his term is over, may not take any of these gifts with him. They're given to him as the president, but once he's no longer the president, it's not his property anymore. He can choose to buy some off the government, but they're the property of the United States government. So I asked, so what happens to all these gifts after they're on this showcase? And they said they're boxed up and they're stored. Which means in storehouses in our country right now, there are so many precious gifts given to presidents of the United States for as long as this tradition was about, no one will ever benefit from it. Right. Think about it. They're put into boxes and they're stored safely. We're paying for its storage, for its security, but no one will benefit from it. Yes, for those few months or years that was on showcase, the benefit was we walked by that room and we said, wow, that was it. But no one's ever going to use any of this. It's never going to be used. And I found that strange and a bit disturbing. Think about it this way. The King of all kings gave us a gift. But he asked us not to put it in a showcase. He wants us to use it. Otherwise, what's the benefit of a gift? If it's just to ooh and ah, does it really have value? Does it have daily value? God gave us a gift, the Torah. And he said, don't put it in a showcase and close the door so people can ooh and ah. Use it. Study from it, live by it, put your life into it. Yes, we make beautiful arks in synagogues to put the Torah scroll, but we take those Torah scrolls out. By Jewish tradition, we read from the Torah on Monday and Thursday and Saturday, so that no 3 days will ever go by without the ark being opened. And then when the printing press came about, we had the ability to publish the Chumash, the 5 books of Moses, so that everyone can have it with them at all times. And as technology changed, the influence and the spreading and the teaching of Torah changed as well. You can study every verse of the Torah online today. You can get so many commentaries available to you. That's the gift that God gave each and every single one of us. Not to put into a showcase, but to use it and benefit from it and improve our lives and improve the world with it. As mentioned, we're going to be studying the 15th chapter of the book of Deuteronomy. We're going to be starting from verse 7, because that's where we left off last year. The 5th book of the Bible, that's the book of Deuteronomy. In Hebrew, it's called Devarim, which means words. In Latin, they changed it to Deuteronomy. The name of the portion, that's the name of the portion that we're going to be studying this semester. We're going to be studying the portion within Deuteronomy of Re'eh. That's the name of the portion that we're studying. The entire 5th book of the 5 books of Moses is an address by Moses. This is taking place days before his passing. So I'm setting the scene for you. We've gone through the story of Genesis, the story of Noah, the story of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. We've gone through the story of Joseph. All of that was book of Genesis. Book of Exodus opens with us living in Egypt. 40 years of slavery in Egypt will come to an end. Moses will be met at the burning bush by God. He'll be told to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let the Jewish people, let the Hebrews out of Egypt, out of slavery. You'll go through the 10 plagues. You'll go through the splitting of the sea. You'll go through Mount Sinai, and then we're going to wander in the wilderness for 40 years. Moses will be told, he has already been told, before book of Deuteronomy, that he will not lead the Jewish people into the land of Egypt. But it'll be done through Joshua, that his job is up. Moses has led us through everything, through the exile, through the splitting of the sea, through Sinai, through teaching us, through a lot of rebellions that we've had, through a lot of complaints that we've had. Moses was there for us. He led us through some battles and some wars in his last year, and now it's coming close. He's got 30 days left to live. And he spends those 30 days talking to us. When I say to us, it was yes to the generation of people in front of him, but it was to us, to each and every single one of us. This is his speech to us. This is his final speech to us. That's the book of Deuteronomy. It's a mission statement of what are the Jewish people all about. This is the mission statement that Moses gives us. And it's about passing this torch, this mission, of being this light unto the nation, to make sure it gets passed from one generation to the next, because it very easily could have ended with Moses and Joshua and never passed on. Moses will focus over and over, you must pass this along. The only way that there is Jewish survival is because the generation decides to pass it to their children and to their grandchildren. And he passes along the laws, the traditions, the understandings, the history. All of that gets passed from one generation to the next. In the book of Deuteronomy, Moses will review many of the laws that he already discussed with us. The book of Exodus, the book of Leviticus, the book of Numbers. Some he'll get into far more detail. Some laws that we haven't discussed in the prior books, he'll talk about it in this book of Deuteronomy. Because Moses understood that once they crossed over the Jordan, once Joshua took the leadership and we passed the Jordan and we entered the land of Canaan, which land will now be changed to the land of Eretz Yisrael, to the land of Israel, things were going to be very different. In the wilderness, God took care of our needs. Manna fell from heaven every day. That was our sustenance. That was our food. That's going to stop the moment we enter Israel. So how are we going to eat? Learn to be a farmer. Learn to be a baker. Open a pizza shop. Pizza is good. So you're going to have to learn to do things yourself. You're not going to have Moses to run to say, ask God for this, ask God for that. You're going to be self-reliant with the help from God from up above. But he understood that things are about to change drastically. You're going to have to learn to plow and to plant and to harvest. You're going to have to establish courts and governments and politicians. You're going to have to govern social relationships between neighbors. You're going to have to take care of the needy, take care of the helpless, take care of the hungry. They're going to need strong faith and self-discipline to avoid the temptations of the pagan neighbors and ways of life into the society that they're coming. Because the Canaanites lived a very different type of life, and the type of life that God wants us to stay away from. You're going to need that strength and that self-discipline to stay away from that type of lifestyle. And we will have failed many a times throughout history, but somehow we always manage to come back to our roots. They're going to need to learn to avoid false prophets, idol worship. They would need to be strong. They would need to be resolute. They would need to be determined. They would need to form an army. So imagine that you needed to write an address that needed to do all that. To inspire not just for a decade, not just for a century, not just for a millennia, but for eternity. Imagine you're writing this speech and you wonder, will people living in the secular year of 2026 know this speech? And we're here to tell Moses up above in heaven, guess what? We're still reading your speech and we're still studying it. We don't go fast. We go rather slow, because we want to understand every word that you're saying. So I hope Moses up above in heaven is proud of us. I'm proud of each and every single one of you. Deuteronomy is not merely a review. It's not a summary of the previous 4 books. It's a review Moses, because that type of review Moses did on a regular basis. Every week, every day, he was teaching review. This is different. This is a last will and testament. Not just, as I mentioned, to that generation, but it's a last will and testament to each and every single one of us. It was after he gives this address of the book of Deuteronomy that God instructs him now to record that word for word. I want you to take the text of what you just said and make it part of my Torah. I want it included. And that's why there's 5 books of Moses, not 4. Because the 5th book, God adopts and takes and says, your speech was so important and so critical, I want it part of my written Torah. And with that, God finalizes and closes the book of the Torah, leaving all of the rest to the oral Torah. And those 5 books of Moses, that's the Torah scroll we still have today. The book crystallizes for us what it means to be a member of the chosen people. What does a chosen people mean? And we've discussed that at length at this class. It also defines so very clearly the Jewish definition of leadership. What does it mean to be a leader? By the end of the book of Numbers, Moses' career as a leader seemed to have come to its end. And he already appointed his successor, Joshua. And it would be Joshua, not Moses, that would lead the people across the Jordan into the promised land. Moses achieved everything he was destined to achieve. From this point forward, for the last days of his life, there will be no more battles to fight, no more miracles to perform, and no more prayers to make on behalf of the people. But it's what Moses does in those last days of his life that mark the greatness of Moses. Because what he does is he assembles the people and he delivers this series of addresses known as the book of Deuteronomy, or in Hebrew, the book of Devarim. Because he packages it all together for us. He explains the details of the laws and the history and the overreaching vision. He taught us to see ourselves as an Am Kadosh, as a holy people, and explained to us what that means. What does holiness mean? He explained that chosenness is not just for yourself, but it's to bring light and goodness and morality and godliness to all the families of the face of the earth, and you need to always remember that. If someone knew nothing about Judaism and the Jewish people, and we were to ask you for a single book that would explain everything to them, we would give them the book of Deuteronomy. And then say, don't stop there, because hopefully that would whet your appetite to learn more and more and more. In Deuteronomy, Moses gave the people their why. They're God's people, the nation of whom he set his love, the people that God rescued from slavery and gave us the commandments, gave us the constitution of liberty. They may be small people, but they're a unique people. They are the people who in themselves, by their very existence, testify to something beyond themselves. They are the people whose fate will defy the normal laws of history. Other nations, says Moses, will recognize the miraculous nature of the Jewish story. So in the last month of Moses' life, he ceases to be Moses the liberator, which he was. He ceases to be Moses the miracle worker, which he was. He ceases to be Moses the Redeemer, which he was, and he becomes Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher. And that role of a teacher becomes the most important role in all of Jewish life. More important than the king, more important than the Kohen, the priests, more important than the Levites. Moshe Rabbeinu. Judaism is alive today because we always had teachers, people that taught us what's right, what's wrong, the how-tos and the whys. The portion that we're in the middle of studying, as I mentioned, is called the portion of Re'eh. That word Re'eh is taken from the first word of the portion, which means to see. In this semester and the spring semester, we're going to cover text on the subject of charity, of helping your fellow, on providing interest-free loans to your fellow. We're going to discuss the laws of Shemitah, that's the sabbatical year, and the portion of Re'eh will conclude with the 3 pilgrimage festivals, the holiday of Passover, the holiday of Shavuot, and the holiday of Sukkot. As I mentioned at the beginning of each semester, sometimes beginning of each class, for the benefit of those that are joining us on Zoom and watching this on YouTube, I ask that during the formal part of the class you try to hold your questions, and then for the benefit of those here in the room, when the class is over, we'll have some time together here for question and answers. Verse 7 on the sheet over here. If you don't have it in front of you out there, it's fine, just listen to me. It's Deuteronomy chapter 15, verse 7. If there will be among you a needy person from one of your brothers in one of your cities in your land, the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart, and you shall not close your hand from your needy brother. Pretty self-explanatory, but we're going to explain anyway. Well before the Torah was given, in the very formation of the founding of our people, in the era of the founding fathers, the patriarchs and the matriarchs of the Jewish people, this principle of charity was already very evident that this will be a fundamental part of our identity. So before we get to the book of Deuteronomy, we already know that this is fundamental. Where do we see that? So let's go back. Let's rewind the clock. We're going to go back before the book of Deuteronomy, before the book of Numbers, before the book of Leviticus, before the book of Exodus, all the way back in the book of Genesis. And in the book of Genesis, let's go to the story of Abraham, the founding father. We know that prior to Abraham, there was also a righteous man. His name was Noah. The Torah testified that Noah was a righteous man. From the story of Noah and the flood, we know he was righteous because God saved him amongst all the families of that generation. Only Noah and his family survives by the building of the ark. The Torah testifies that he was a righteous man and he walked with God. He didn't steal, he didn't cheat, he didn't lie, he didn't murder like everyone else was doing around him. He walked with God. But what we don't find Noah doing at any part of the story of Noah is convincing anyone else in his generation to follow this path. There was no Noah outreach program. It was Noah being good because he was good. He believed in God, he worshiped God, he served God, and he didn't do any of the bad stuff that everyone in society was doing. But he didn't go next door and tell Charlie, hey, you got to change your ways. He didn't do anything to affect society. So he's recorded as a righteous man, but he's not the patriarch of this new nation that God's going to rest so much of the mission statement of the world on. Because to be part of this people, you need to know that you have a responsibility to the neighbors as well. There's a parable told about Abraham. Abraham grew up in an interesting environment. There was a king Nimrod who paraded himself as God. His own father Terah was an idol worshiper and one who sold idols. That was his business. He created the idols, he sold the idols. And in this world comes this Abraham who begins to rebel early on as a young child. He shows that thing, but he's confused himself. He's trying to figure it out. This is before God speaks to him. He's trying to make sense of this strange world. And the parable that is often given to understand Abraham's confusion and how he comes out of the confusion is, suppose you see a beautiful palace that's built. When you see the palace, you know this palace had a planner, an architect, a builder, an owner, someone who thought through every floor and every room of this palace, someone who had an idea and built it because it's magnificent. It didn't just happen on its own. There's a plan. And then you see that this palace is on fire. It's burning. But the owner isn't anywhere near it to put out the fire. And you're confused. If you put so much effort into building this palace, why aren't you here to protect it? Why aren't you putting out the fire? And then he realizes that it's up to him to put out the fire. And he gets a bucket of water and he starts putting out the fire. The parable, what does it mean? Abraham sees a beautiful world. This world has a purpose. It has a builder. It has an owner. It has a designer. It's here for something. It's magnificent. There's a sun. There's a moon. There's stars. There's plants. There's flowers. There's animals. There's birds. There's a plan to this. But he sees the world is on fire. It's chaos here. It's wicked. People are hurting each other. Where is the builder of the world to put out the fire? Why isn't he getting involved? Until he realizes that it's his task to help put out the fire. That he needs to get involved. It's not just an awareness that there is a God, there's an awareness that God wants something from him. And that changes history. History is never the same from the moment Abraham gets to that awareness. Because he realizes and he passes it along to his children, all the way to us, that the world is built on human responsibility for goodness in the world. We have an obligation to spread that goodness. Goodness can't be limited to just spiritual goodness. It can't just be I believe. It can't just be I talk to God, I pray to God, the rituals. That's important. Praying, connecting to God, very important. But goodness must include human goodness. Kindness, caring, sharing, feeding, teaching. That's up to us. So let's get to a story in the life of Abraham. It's chapter 18 of the book of Genesis. We're told that a story that God decides that he's going to destroy 5 cities. The cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, these 5 cities, he's going to wipe them out. Totally destroy, obliterate them. Why does he reach this decision? Because their wickedness, their evil, reached such a point of evil that there was no redeeming factor. There's no hope for them. And so an angel is dispatched from up above to come down to earth, and the angel's job is to destroy those 5 cities. Living in those cities at the time was someone named Lot. Lot was Abraham's nephew. Lot had a wife, he had 2 daughters, and he had 2 son-in-laws. As a gift to Abraham, God sends an angel that your job is to go and rescue Abraham's relatives. If you know the rest of the story, you'll know that Lot will survive, his 2 daughters will survive, his wife will not, his 2 son-in-laws will not. We don't have to get into the details of the story, but that's the end of the story. But an angel is dispatched to destroy, an angel is dispatched to save. That's the background of the story. You with me so far? Yes. Just before, drum roll, action takes place, we have this oddity in the narrative. Something you don't find throughout the text of the 5 books of Moses. It breaks from its normal style of speaking. The Torah speaks in 3rd term, and it has the author talking to himself. He's having a conversation with himself. And it's recorded in the text of the Torah for us to read. It's very strange. He's no longer telling us a story, but he's revealing to the audience an internal conversation. God is talking to himself, And he's recording what was going on in his mind at the time. Think about your own communication system. When you're speaking to someone else, you're filtering and selecting words. You have a thought in mind. Now your job is you want to give that thought over to another person. You use the mechanism of words, of speech. For those that can't speak, they'll use sign language, but they're selecting words so that you can receive what's in my mind. But when you talk to yourself, you're sharing the most intimate of thoughts, of deeper thoughts that you're not necessarily going to share with others. Your own thoughts are far more private. You'll decide from your own thoughts what you want to share. But that which is in your own mind when you're communicating with yourself, those are your highest thoughts. When the Torah says, Vahashem Omar, and God said, and he's not talking to Abraham, he's not talking to the angels, he's telling us that at the time that I dispatched the angels, I had this internal conversation with myself. That tells you this is deep. He's sharing something personal with us, almost something private with us. And this is what he says. Shall I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Question mark. I'm sending an angel right now to destroy 5 cities, and I didn't tell Abraham about it. Is that right of me? That's so strange, because God does a lot in the Bible. He never says, or should I inform that? What's such a big deal? You made a decision, you're carrying out your decision. But that's God's reflection, and he's sharing with us that he stopped there and he's thinking, is it right of me to do what I'm about to do without informing Abraham? So we're reading this and we're mystified. If we're reading it for the first time, we're saying, does that sound like the infinite God is debating if he should talk to some little creature crawling on the world there? He continues. He continues to explain to us why he's even having this internal debate. For I know him. I've gotten to know this Abraham guy. And I know that he will command his children to do acts of kindness and justice. Not only that he's a kind person, a caring person, a charitable person himself, but I know he's going to command his children to do the same. And so I love him. I have developed a relationship with this human being because this human being has shown so much kindness. It's not just that he practices charity and justice, but he's going to instruct, he's going to teach, he's going to inspire his children to practice these ways going forward. And that's the reason I have hope in the future, is because there is an Abraham. And there will be descendants of Abraham that will teach the world to be charitable and just. It's a fascinating conversation that God's having with himself. This is the first appearance of the word tzedakah in the Bible. First time it's mentioned. And it's what it's about. Why God loves Abraham so much? Because he does what? Tzedakah. Because he gives charity. Because he's charitable. Because he cares about hungry people. Number 2, that charity is a family legacy. It's what God loved so much that Abraham was going to teach his children and his grandchildren and pass it on all the way to us. Number 3, that God chose him because of this value. That's the reason he selected him. The Talmud says that the Jewish people must always be recognizable by 3 attributes: by compassion, by modesty, and by benevolence. That's what Abraham told his grandchildren. Gotta always remember the poor, the hungry, the needy. The Jewish definition of tzedakah comes from the word tzedek. Tzedek means just. You can't look at it as I am superior because I'm the giver. I'm the one with the wallet, with the cash, and you are the recipient and therefore you're lower. Can't look at it that way. Because I'm the one giving, I'm the better of the two. You're the one needing, so you have to look highly up at me. No. We give because this is just. This is the godly system of sharing. We give because it's our duty, because it's our obligation, because it's our identity. It's who we are. It's why we are. The contrast with the cities of Sodom couldn't be any more clear. The wickedness of Sodom, what was the evil of Sodom? Was that it was the epitome of selfishness. It was the exact opposite. It was cruel. Charity was not just not given in Sodom, it was outlawed. It was against the law to share and to care and to give. You weren't allowed to feed a stranger. They legalized selfishness. The sins of the other Canaanite nations, they were great. Their immorality was there. They were idol worshipers. All of that is recorded, but God says, I can tolerate them for a few more 100 years until the Jewish people are ready to enter their land of Canaan. But these guys, I'm going to weed them out now. To make selfishness the law, I can't tolerate that anymore. And they have to be destroyed. And not only were they destroyed, but if you know your geography, you know that it was transformed into a salty wilderness where nothing will ever be rebuilt in its place till this very day. Why? Because they rationalized about the stranger and the poor. Why should we feed them? It will only take away from our wealth. If we give anything to a stranger from another city, then our city's wealth gets lowered. A visitor that made the mistake of entering their borders were tortured and sexually abused. And if anyone tried to break the law by feeding one of them, they would get killed themselves. Man can and will sin. We all have animalistic passions and we don't always succeed in controlling them. But to erect a society with a social code, with a legal code in defense of selfishness and in opposition to kindness, that's an abomination above all others. Especially that this was taking place in what was already determined to become the eventually holy land of Israel. So God determines that'll bring this existence to an end. But first, he contrasts that with us, with the audience, with Abraham, telling us the ways of Abraham in this internal conversation that he has with himself. God will decide that he's going to share it with Abraham. After all, this is the land that I promised to him. It's his land. I shall let him know, minus 5 cities. And so he informs Abraham of his decision. If you know the story, how does Abraham respond? God, how can you do such a thing? He's a lover of people. And God says, but they're so wicked. And he says, but certainly there's going to be some righteous people there. God says, okay, how many? So Abraham will negotiate because he's a good attorney. And he will say, if you find 50 righteous people in all 5 cities, you'll spare them. God says, you got yourself a deal. He tries some more. He says, what about if there's 45? You got yourself a deal. What if there's 40? Are you going to wipe them out because we're missing 10 from the original number I negotiated? We're just short 10. You got a deal, 40. He'll go to 30. He'll go to 20. He'll go down to 10. And when God agrees to 10, Abraham is so convinced that there's going to have to be 10 righteous people in the 50 cities. And that's the deal that Abraham reaches with God. And when he wakes up in the morning and he sees the smoke, he knows there weren't 10 righteous people. There weren't any righteous people. But God will inform him that he's sending an angel to save his nephew, and that his nephew and his family will live if they choose to leave. And only Lot and his 2 daughters will end up leaving.
My wife leaves too.
The wife does leave, but she doesn't make it all the way. Doesn't make it all the way. But what we see from this Genesis story is very clearly how important charity, this verse that we just read, how important it's going to be to the foundation, to the very bedrock of what we're all about. There's a story told about a man who was extremely charitable. But it wasn't just the fact that he helped, that he gave. It was how he did it. He would welcome the poor person that would come to his door and said, I'm hungry, I need some help for my family. It wasn't just he gave them the food or he gave them the money. He would welcome them into his home. Come sit down. Let me get you a cup of coffee. Let me get you a Danish. The way he treated them by making them feel special, not making them feel humiliated that they needed to ask for money. And he was so known for this, for his warmth and for everything that came about with him. So the Rebbe of this community came to see him himself. And he said, I've heard so much about the ways you give charity and how beautiful it is. So I want to give you a blessing. And the blessing is that you should become extremely wealthy so that you can continue doing your charitable deeds. The man was touched. He was humbled by it. The Rebbe gave him the blessings, and sure enough, with time, his business took off. It expanded. It grew. It grew. He needed a larger warehouse. He needed a bigger company. He got a bigger home. He got a lot of staff. And he kept on growing and growing and growing, and he became very, very busy. But there was tremendous demand on his time. So when a person came to the door, it wasn't him that answered the door. It was a staff person that answered the door. And the staff person knew that the person would always want help given, so he would give him a check, or give him cash, or give him food. So it wasn't that anyone wasn't getting anything. The warmth was lacking. That personal touch wasn't there. And people started talking of it. He's just not the same anymore. It's not the same experience anymore. Charitable, yes. He's not cruel. He's not heartless. But he's busy. He just doesn't have the time for us. His Rebbe heard about the changes. He felt guilty and he felt responsibility because he's the one that blessed him with all this wealth. Things were better before I gave him the blessings. So he decides he's going to visit himself. He knocks on the door, staff person answers the door, and he's told, the wealthy man is busy, sorry. What can I do? I'll take care of your needs. He says, you tell him who it is. Tell him my name and tell him that it's me that's at the door. All right, but I know he has a very busy schedule. Just tell him who's at the door. A minute later, he hears it's his own Rebbe at the door. He comes running out. Wow, I'm so honored to have you come visit. What can I do for you? He says, I heard about your house, and I would love a tour of the new house. I just wanted to see how beautiful of a house you have. Really? Sure, I'll show you around. And he starts showing him room to room in his house that he built for himself. He gives him the royal tour. In the living room, there was this huge mirror. It was a magnificent piece. It was beautifully framed. In that same room, there were also beautiful windows to the outside street. The Rebbe stands in front of the mirror, and he asks his friend to stand next to him as well. And he says, tell me, what do you see? He says, Rebbe, I see myself. It's a mirror. I see myself. Oh, interesting. Come with me now. Let's stand at this other piece of glass. And they stare at the window that faces Main Street. What do you see? Well, I see people walking. Well, who do you see walking? He says, oh, that's Chaim the tailor, and that's Motel the butcher, and that's Yentl the widow. He says, doesn't make much sense. They're both pieces of glass. And when we looked in front of that piece of glass, you saw yourself. And when we look upon this piece of glass, you see Chaim and Yankel and Motel and Yentl. Why is there a different view if they're both glass? So the fellow answers the Rebbe, and he says, because that piece of glass has this silver on the back of it, and thus it doesn't allow transparency. So it bounces whatever is in front of it, and that's why I see myself. But the windows to the outside, they don't have that layer of silver, and so I see right through it. It's transparent. Interesting, says the Rebbe. So before you have the silver backing, you see the people on the streets, and you know of their plights. You know of their difficulties. You know of their needs, because you're seeing them. But since we added the silver, you only tend to see yourself. So what if we just removed the silver? And the fellow understood. He understood the message. The way the blessing came, the blessing could be removed. If it's going to bring about a change, I want an increase in your character, in your kindness, not a decrease in it. And so what he did was, he scraped off part of the silver of the background of this magnificent mirror, so that any time he sees the mirror, it should remind him of what the message of his wealth is all about. It's about opening that door even more and bringing more people in. You see, his kindness didn't disappear. He was just too busy for it. And now the Rebbe accomplishes that he can see, respect, and care for one another. The Torah understood the human weakness better than we do. And that is why in the verse that we just, half hour ago, what we read about charity, what does it say? It doesn't begin with money. It begins with heart. Do not harden your heart. And then it says, do not close your hand. Because where does charity begin?
In the heart.
You need to feel it. Once the heart is open, the hand will let you give. Because the heart hardens first, and only afterwards does the hand close. The Torah is not warning us about poverty, it's warning us about comfort, about success that turns into insulation, about silver that turns a mirror inward. That's what the Torah is afraid of. And that's the Torah's reminder that the poor are never truly absent, they're only sometimes unseen. There are always people that need. And Judaism demands of us more than just generosity. It demands that we remain the kind people who can still see who's standing outside that could use that comfort, could use that help, who's next to us, who's near us, because there will always be people in need. That's not new. Note, however, how the Torah addresses it. The Torah is not only teaching us what to do, it's uncovering why we sometimes don't do it. Because the obstacle to being charitable, it's really information. It's not that we don't know the mitzvah of it. We all know it's one of the important commandments. The obstacle is really something quieter. It's the tightening of the heart. It's the calculation. It's the voice that says, if I open my hand, what happens to me? Do I have less? And so the Torah does something astonishing. It doesn't only command generosity, it commands this inner freedom. Don't harden your heart. Meaning, don't let need turn you into a smaller person. Don't let your thoughts of, but what if I give and I have less for myself? Don't let that be part of the equation. Because God will bless you with what you need more than what you're going to give away. You can give and still be a closed person. You can write a check and still feel resentful about it. You can help someone and feel superior to them. And that's why the Torah addresses it in the way it addresses it. It's not the money. The money is secondary. First, it's your heart. I want you to want to help. I want you to want to give. I don't want you to feel egotistical because you're doing it. I want you to feel this is the godly way of how I set up the world. And then, I have no doubt the checkbook will open. I have no doubt that the giving will be there. If you could learn not to harden your heart. Earlier, the Torah built this system, leaving corners of the field for food, protecting the poor from interest, requiring tithing. But here the Torah moves from policy to personhood. Here it says, if you want a society of holiness, you need more than a welfare structure. You need hearts that don't harden. It's noteworthy that the first reference in the Torah, in the book of Genesis, is pre-law. It's before there's a Ten Commandments, before there's a Jewish people, because it's telling us that charity is our identity. It's why God selected Abraham. Keep in mind, before Sinai, there is no enforcement mechanism, right? There's no court, there's no obligation, and that's precisely the point. The Torah is teaching us that tzedakah cannot begin as compliance. You know, you pay your taxes, right? Part of your taxes goes to help poor people, right? Welfare, there's a lot of programs that it helps, right? When you write that check to the United States government, you're not feeling good about it. You don't feel charitable about it, right? God doesn't want his request of charity to become like a tax. He doesn't want that feeling. He wants you to want to give because it feels so right and so good. And so the first reference to it is pre-law. It's about a story about Abraham. And God's telling you how much he appreciated Abraham. No one forced Abraham to open up his tent to the poor. No one asked Abraham to go ahead and help the travelers because they were hungry and thirsty. He did it because that was his character. That's what God is looking for in us. So when God says, for I have known him to do tzedakah and justice, he's not just praising Abraham's actions alone, but he's praising the educational vision that he's going to command his children and instruct his children, that this becomes embedded in us and normalized, that this is our identity, this is who we are. And only after a person internalizes kindness as our identity, then the Torah will go on to legislate it. But first, I need you to know, this is who you are. So I'll conclude with this question to think about, and we all know the right answer. If tzedakah were no longer required tomorrow, would Jewish generosity disappear, or would it continue? And what God wants us to say, it's not because it's one of the 613 commandments. It's because like I breathe, I give. That's the identity that God wants from us. We'll start.